I'm Russell Lee Sharman. I am a filmmaker and a professor of practice in the Department of Communication at the University of Arkansas. I studied film as an undergrad at the University of Texas at Austin. Between my sophomore and junior year, I actually went out to Hollywood and worked as a production assistant on a Civil War zombie vampire movie, which was literally the worst movie ever made. Still a great experience. For some reason, I don't know, it kind of put me off the industry for a bit, and somehow I ended up becoming an anthropologist. I got a PhD in anthropology and taught in New York for about 15 years. But I never really gave up the idea of film and my love for film, and in particular, the one part of film that you can do for free, which is writing. So I continued to write almost as a kind of hobby outside of my academic work. And then somehow in 2008, I sold a screenplay to Warner Brothers, and that began a whole second career for me. Started getting hired to rewrite other people's scripts, and it was a sort of heady, exciting time until about 2013. I decided that maybe I was done with being an anthropologist and wanted to give myself entirely to filmmaking. Moved out to California for about a year. Around that same time, some friends of ours in New York who were actors moved to Fayetteville because they had heard great things about the town. They had been connected to Theater Square, which is a great local regional theater. Just so much of what they said about the town seemed so exciting and interesting to us. So sort of almost on a whim, which seems to be a pattern in my life, we decided to drop everything and move to Fayetteville. Stopped by the Department of Communication here at the University of Arkansas and met with the chair of the department, Robert Brady, and just sort of said, hey, this is who I am and this is what I do. I'd love to be able to teach. In part because as much as I was ready to let go of the academy, I was still very engaged in teaching and was really interested in being in the classroom, but maybe doing something I was a bit more passionate about, which was film. And in 2014, I started to teach a couple of courses. The funny thing about making art is we tend to really protect our ideas. And one of the things that I've had to learn is that there are no new ideas, right? The goal should be to develop your filmmaking voice, whether it's writing or cinematography or what have you, so that regardless of the idea, it's your particular voice that makes your version of that idea special. There's no originality when it comes to plot. Plot is the least of your worries. What is your filmmaking voice? How are you going to tell that story, and what's going to make that special? So I try to encourage folks as much as possible to not worry about being so possessive and protective over your ideas, but be productive and possessive over honing your craft, because that's what will make your work different. Back in the early 90s when I was at the University of Texas, I remember the first day of my film production class. It was taught by this Canadian filmmaker, Simon Hemingway, still remember his name, and he gave this big speech on the first day that was all about how we are not here because we're going to make it in Hollywood. That's not why we're there. None of us are going to make it in Hollywood. The goal was to learn the craft. And so most of us took that in stride, but there was one student who raised his hand and said, well, then what the heck are we doing here? And that guy turned out to be Matthew McConaughey, the only person from that class that you may have heard of. So there's two sides to that story. On the one hand, I think there is something to the idea of learning the craft, learning the basics because you love the craft, because you love filmmaking. But the other side of that story is becoming successful is about not taking no for an answer, is about persistence, is about having that attitude of, I am doing this to be successful. I love that certain entrepreneurs locally have decided to invest in the future of filmmaking. There's always been an interest creatively. It's been about trying to get the financial support to help those folks who have that passion do what they do. Why should we as a community in Northwest Arkansas support the arts? Obviously that ties into a much bigger question. Why should anyone support the arts? Why should any society support the arts? I think a lot of times we consume media, whether it's streaming on Netflix or we actually pay the $10 to go to the AMC and watch a feature film. What we're experiencing is a global art form that has an incredibly powerful role to play in shaping society. In that sense, Northwest Arkansas should care about the arts because that is how we represent ourselves to the broader society, that is the United States, but also the world, but also how we reflect ourselves to ourselves. We are a diverse community, but I think it's really important that we represent that diversity. It's through film content, programs like yours, that enable us to appreciate other ways of being, other ways of seeing. And that is the arts. That is what the arts do for us, is provide that kind of window into other people's experiences. And that's probably a bit of the anthropologist coming out in me, but I think the two go together actually really well. Anthropology being sort of that understanding of the other, and the arts being one of the ways we do that. It is a mechanism by which we understand the other and how we understand ourselves.